Sometimes bad Pokemon moves can randomly be really good and competitive. Gust, for example, is an early game attack that you see on such heavy hitters as Pidgey. With only 40 power, this is not designed to be used at a high level, even in the base game, but amazingly the Pokemon Flygon can use the move Gust in Gen 3 OU as its only option to be able to hit Breloom and Heracross for super effective damage. Despite the low power, it's strong enough to one-hit KO these particular Pokemon. Growl is one of the first Pokemon moves you encounter in the games. A very unremarkable move that simply lowers the enemy's attack stat by 1 stage. Largely quite dreadful. But amazingly, the Pokemon Miltank can use this move in Gen 2 OU in order to 1v1 Snorlax. By lowering its attack, it cancels out Snorlax's coast boosts and prevents it from doing enough damage to win in a 1 vs 1. But did you know that even the move Poison Sting has a competitive purpose? Yes, Poison Sting, which you might be familiar with from Viridian Forest, utilized by the incredibly powerful Pokemon Weedle. Poison Sting is a bad move by design. It's an early game attack, not meant to be used beyond the first couple gyms. If that, Poison Sting has a measly power of only base 15, dealing very pathetic damage. And it has a 30% chance to apply poison, but that's only level 1 poison, rather than the more generally powerful toxic poison. So why the hell would anybody use Poison Sting in a competitive context? What could be the advantage of this? Clodsire is a new Pokemon in Gen 9 that has been quite successful competitively, thanks to its great defensive abilities, Unaware and Water Absorb, as well as its nice min-maxed stats, lending itself well to a special wall role. And Clodsire is the one that sometimes uses Poison Sting. And the reason players started to use Poison Sting is because of some frustrations with Clodsire's other similar options. The most common option to simply apply poison is the move Toxic, a status-inflicting move that will badly poison the target. Bad poison is much better than regular poison, with damage that ramps up every single turn, applying much more pressure than regular poison, which only does a set 1/16 of an enemy's HP every single turn. So Toxic is the go-to option. But there is an issue with Toxic. Being a status move, if Clodsire is under the effects of Taunt, it cannot be used. The Taunt answers Toxic. Toxic is also ineffective against certain Pokemon, like Hatterene. Hatterene has the ability Magic Bounce, which bounces back certain status ailments to its opponent. So if you click Toxic against Hatterene, you will be toxicked. Clodsire itself is immune to being toxicked, but Hatterene is still completely immune and therefore can abuse Clodsire and set up in its face without much detriment. For this reason, players started to use the move Poison Jab instead. Poison Jab is a good poison type attack with 80 power and a 30% chance to poison. This can hit Hatterene for good damage. Even though Clodsire is not necessarily an offensive Pokemon, the damage is respectable since it's super effective, and the poison chance is appreciated too. Even if it's not toxic poison, it is still good to poison the enemy and apply a bit of pressure to them, and some damage over time. As long as the enemy does not have our leftovers, they still will eventually perish to the poison, and Clodsire is bulky enough to take advantage even of regular poison, non-toxic poison. And the enhanced value of Poison Jab not being able to be taunted and also being more effective against these abilities that prevent status moves made it a genuine option. But there is a problem with Poison Jab that Clodsire did not anticipate. You see, Poison Jab requires Clodsire to run up to the enemy and jab them physically with its little fin. And in doing so, Clodsire is putting itself in peril, oh dear. By making physical contact with the enemy, Clodsire might hurt itself against spiky objects like the rocky helmet. If you attack an enemy and make physical contact with them and they're wearing a rocky helmet, you will take a bit of damage, and that's no good. Rocky helmet is quite common on Pokemon like Landorus Therian and others, so that's a detriment to running Poison Jab. You open yourself up to a little bit of physical pain, and nobody wants that. Poison Jab also makes physical contact against effects such as Moltres with Flame Body. Flame Body has a 30% chance to burn enemies that make physical contact. And Clodsire getting burned is a potential disaster, as it would now be taking chip damage every turn, and it would be doing less damage with its own Earthquake, which is quite bad. So the logical next step was to find an option that solves this problem. And amazingly, the option that does solve this problem is Poison Sting, famously used on Weedle. Poison Sting may have a very low base power of only 15, dealing absolutely pathetic damage comparison to Poison Jab, but Poison Sting does not make physical contact because you are shooting a dart at the enemy from a safe distance rather than having to go up to them and jab them with your fin and make contact with Moltres, who is very hot and made of fire. Strategically, this is quite smart. Even though the damage is worse, it is much safer because you are not putting yourself in harm's way, and it still has the 30% poison chance, which is the main reason you're using it. To not get taunted, to hit Hatterene, and to apply poison. So Poison Sting is a genuine option for these reasons. And the other advantage of Poison Sting over Poison Jab is that it has a much higher PP. You see, Poison Sting has a 56 PP. It can be used 56 times. There are a lot of darts that Clodsire stores somewhere for combat. So with this amount of PP, the longevity of Clodsire is enhanced. It can click Poison Sting to stall turns, and there are so many to click that the game can go very long and Clodsire can be there for that. Who knew that such a seemingly dreadful move would have real competitive application and genuine merit over other similar options that apply poison? How unbelievable. Weedle is feeling very proud right now of what it's contributed to the world. Thank you, Weedle, for teaching Clodsire this valued technique, which it has used to great effect. Electro Ball is a move that is generally not very good. It's an interesting move, but in practice it ends up being worse than other electric type attacks the vast majority of the time. Electro Ball's power is based on how fast you are compared to the enemy, and it can have up to 150 base power if you are significantly faster than the enemy, like an Electrode who's really fast using Electro Ball against a Caterpie who is very slow. This will deal incredible damage. The problem though is that the power of this move is way too variable. Using Electro Ball against something that is decently fast, not even that fast, but decently fast, will do pretty terrible damage. You'll only do good damage with Electro Ball in very specific matchups, so it just feels inconsistent. Gyro Ball is a similar attack, but inverted. It deals more damage the slower you are than the target, and this is a better move because you are more in control of how slow you are. Something like Ferrothorn can purposely run as low a speed stat as possible with negative IVs and a minus speed nature to maximize the power of Gyro Ball, and it's often attacking things faster than it. But Electro Ball is just way too varied, and it's unfortunate to deal so little damage to anything reasonably fast. For that reason, Electro Ball is generally inferior to the simple move Thunderbolt, which has a consistent 90 power plus a 10% para chance, which does come up pretty often. You would much rather have the consistent damage than the more inconsistent Electro Ball. But there is one funny case where Electro Ball has a purpose in competitive Pokemon, and that is in the Gen 6 Ubers tier. Electro Ball can be used by the Pokemon Mewtwo for a funny reason, but why the hell would you use Electro Ball when Mewtwo just gets Thunderbolt, which is seemingly far better? Well, Electro Ball does enough damage to one-hit KO a specific Pokemon after a Calm Mind in Gen 6 Ubers, and that specific Pokemon is Mega Sableye. Mega Sableye is actually a really excellent Pokemon in Ubers for its fantastic typing and great defenses, as well as the powerful ability Magic Bounce. But you'll notice that it has a very, very low speed of base 20. Because its speed is so low, Electro Ball from a Mewtwo who is very fast happens to do incredible damage specifically to Mega Sableye. And Mega Sableye might think it's safe enough to handle a Mewtwo or a Mega Mewtwo Y. Mega Sableye is immune to Psychic and has the bulk to take on this Pokemon, but not if they have Electro Ball to punish the speed differential between the two Pokemon. After a Calm Mind, Mewtwo or Mega Mewtwo Y will just one-hit KO Mega Sableye unexpectedly. And being able to do massive damage to this particular Pokemon can be very useful, as you are surprising them with a unexpected KO. So if you're watching this and you're not capable of reaching a very high speed, be careful of electronic spheres. You might be in trouble against that. Steer clear of that. I'm talking to you Munchlax with your base 5 speed. You watch out. Electro Ball is going to end your career. You be very careful, Munchlax. The move Torment is interesting, but generally not popular and commonly used. Pretty bad. Torment is a status effect that will prevent the target from selecting the same move twice in a row. Certainly interesting, but generally, when you torment something, they're not going to be that debilitated by this effect, and can simply just use different attacks every turn without a lot of trouble. You can also simply switch out to reset Torment if it's that big of a deal. Compared to other status effects like Taunt and Encore, Torment is not commonly seen. But there's one Pokemon that I recall using Torment to great effect in a competitive context, and that was Heatran in the Gen 4 OU metagame. In this world, Heatran could actually get a lot out of Torment. Heatran's Fire Steel typing means that generally Pokemon will only run one attack on their moveset that can hit it super effectively, like Earthquake or Close Combat or a Water type attack. It's pretty uncommon for there to be multiple moves on a Pokemon's moveset that threaten Heatran super effectively. So if Heatran uses Torment against, for example, an offensive Dragonite, Heatran can simply protect every single time the Dragonite tries to use Earthquake and then be totally safe at all other times, shrugging off Dragon Claw or Ice Punch or just about any other coverage. It helps if Heatran already has a substitute up from a prior interaction and can then safely torment whatever switches in to protect itself, and this strategy is often used alongside Toxic Spikes. Toxic Spikes are an entry hazard that poison the enemy as they switch onto the field if they're grounded. And if you have 2 layers of Toxic Spikes, they will apply Bad Poison, which has ramping damage. This Heatran set can keep substituting, protecting, and tormenting to basically just sit there stalling for ages while the enemy slowly dies to all these Toxic Spikes. And awkwardly can't hit Heatran very well because every time they try to, they're tormented and have to switch out and back in and rack up more poison damage. Actually a very effective strategy. Rather an immoral strategy, tormenting the enemy to the point of self-defeat. Perhaps the most frustrating Heatran set in the game's history to play against. And the move certainly lives up to its name in this context. But regardless, this is probably the most effective usage of an otherwise rather bad move that is not commonly seen in competitive play. Present is the signature move of Delibird. Delibird is a bad Pokemon and Present is a pretty bad move. You may think there's nothing wrong with receiving a gift. This might sound in fact quite nice, but this gift can cause pain and suffering. Present is a move that has a random effect. It can be an attack with either 40, 80, or 120 base power randomly, or it can heal the opponent for 1/4 of their max HP. It should be pretty clear why this is a bad move. It's inconsistent. You don't know what it's going to do. And at the best case, 120 power, you could simply run the move Mega Kick, which is similar with 80 accuracy, but it always does what you want. Surely more consistent than a 90% accurate Present that could heal the opponent unintentionally. How dreadful. So why would anybody use Present in its intended state? Well, they wouldn't, because its intended state is broken in Gen 2. This is a glitched move that doesn't work like other attacks, and for that reason it's randomly kind of good. Pokemon attacks use a mathematical formula to figure out how much damage they should deal, and this formula factors in various values from the attacking Pokemon and the defending Pokemon. Their level, their offensive stat, either attack or special attack, their defending stat, defense or special defense, and the base power of the attack as well, plus type effectiveness, to then multiply the damage if applicable. What if the move Present is glitched and breaks the damage formula? When you use Present in Generation 2, the level, attack, and defense variables of the damage formula will not be what they should be. They won't coincide with your Pokemon and their Pokemon. Their values will be replaced. For whatever reason, the attack value will be based on what type the target is. If they are Rock or Steel type, the attack value will be 5. And if they are any other type, the attack value will be 10. The level value of the damage formula will be based on the index number of the defending Pokemon's type, which is random as hell, isn't it? Each type in the game has a corresponding index number, probably used to refer to different types in the code. So for some reason that value got mixed up in the damage formula, and the level value is just whatever type they are in the index. So for example, if you are using Present against a water type Pokemon, the index number of the water type is 21, and therefore the level of both Pokemon in the damage formula will be 21. And the defense value in the damage calculation will be based on the index number of your Pokemon. And this is very interesting, because Blissey, the Pokemon Blissey, can use the move Present. And Blissey is a normal type. and the index number of normal type is 0. Now if a 0 is present in the damage formula, it gets rounded up to a 1 so that it doesn't break anything in the mathematics. So basically, if Blissey uses present, they deal pretty good damage due to the fact that they set the enemy's defense to 1, and the level in the damage calculation is based on the enemy's type. So you can randomly deal great damage to a Pokemon like Cloyster. Cloyster usually has great physical bulk to take hits, but since this move is glitched and ignores all of Cloyster's actual stats and actual traits, the damage that present deals is really high against Cloyster. Now it is a little bit random because the base power of the attack is completely variable, and also it could heal the enemy, but much of the time you're just going to deal good damage, way more than Blissey could usually deal to Cloyster. And any other water type too, since water index number is 21, you will have a high level of 21. Delibird's desire to prank the enemy with a present that actually hurts them has had far more lethal ramifications than he ever expected. Now Delibird feels a little bit of residual guilt as a result of all of this. He's personal friends with Cloyster and didn't intend for Blissey to take his technique and punish Cloyster, simply for being a water type and having a 21 index value. How could Cloyster be so stupid to play into the present matchup? I mean, come on. I personally think this is entirely Delibird's fault and he is being punished with karmic justice for his deceit, but perhaps that's a controversial opinion in the community. Zap Cannon is a bad attack, folks. Now there's some good qualities about it. It has 100 power, which is very good. Electric type special attack, and it has a 100% paralysis chance. The problem though is that it only has 50% accuracy, making it incredibly inconsistent. And it's an awkward move. Having high power and para chance are usually not very synergistic. You're using a high power attack usually trying to defeat the enemy and send them to their grave. So paralyzing them doesn't matter if they're already deceased, therefore why not just use Thunderbolt, which only has a little bit lower power compared to Zap Cannon, but a 100% accuracy. If you want to paralyze the opponent, you would simply use Thunder Wave on Nuzzle, and that would have a similar impact. There's not much application for dealing a lot of damage and paralyzing the enemy with such inconsistency in the accuracy, so it's a strange move and one that isn't commonly used. But there is a Pokemon that can viably use the move in a competitive scenario, and that is the Pokemon Forretress in the Generation 3 OU metagame. And Forretress uses Zap Cannon for an amazing reason. One of the greatest adversaries for Forretress in this metagame is Gengar. Gengar is a ghost type, meaning it can block Forretress's rapid spin and also block explosion. If Forretress chooses to explode against Gengar, it will perish with no advantage. A tragic end. And Forretress is not very good at threatening Gengar either. Some attacks it often runs are Earthquake and Hidden Power Bug to threaten common matchups like Magneton and Claydol, but these do nothing against a Gengar. Gengar shrugs off bug damage with times 4 resistance and is immune to Earthquake. But Zap Cannon can actually do something to the incoming Gengar. Zap Cannon, if it lands, will deal a bit of chip damage to Gengar, which can be very relevant, putting Gengar into more damage ranges to potentially meet an early end. And also it will paralyze Gengar, making it far less effective. One of Gengar's greatest traits is its high speed, and with paralysis, Gengar is pretty much ruined. So Zap Cannon is actually a way to do something to one of Forretress's greatest and most common switch-ins and adversaries. It is inaccurate, but the mere chance that Zap Cannon could connect, or the surprise value if it does connect, is valuable enough that this is a set that you sometimes see. This Forretress set is also not bad against Skarmory, who will sometimes try and stay in against Forretress and 1 versus 1 it with repeated drill pecks. But Zap Cannon will deal actual decent damage to Skarmory due to the super effective electric type special damage. Plus it will paralyze them, meaning they're far less effective at the 1v1 when there's full paralysis in action. Forretress probably would just use Thunder Wave instead of this if it got it, but the best it has to paralyze enemies is Zap Cannon. For that reason, that's what it uses. It's the best it can do. But the chip damage and the high power making up for Forretress's low special attack does have some relevance here too, doing actual damage to the Gengar and Skarmory. It's a good surprise option that can sort of overcome the poor accuracy just for the high upside of hitting. and the threat being powerful enough to dissuade Gengar entering in the future, even if you do miss the first time. It's like an insurance against the incoming Gengar that might let you squeeze in a rapid spin because they're too scared to come in and get parried. A rather devious trick from Forretress, but Forretress is known for his intelligent combat strategy, and introducing this wild card into the mix can create favorable outcomes for him. Well done to Forretress for planning ahead in such a way, playing 4D chess. The move Bounce is pretty bad. Bounce is a flying type attack with 85 power and 85 accuracy, as well as a 30% paralysis chance. The big problem with Bounce though is that it takes 2 turns to execute. On the first turn, you will bounce into the air and be immune to incoming attacks. On the second turn, Bounce will occur, and the damage will be dealt. The problem with these 2-turn attacks in a competitive context is that they are completely telegraphed. Once the Pokemon bounces into the air, you know exactly what's coming, so you can just switch into a resistance. It's not as if you're playing the single-player game, and the AI just sits there and tanks the bounce, even though they know that certain death is in their future. A human being with intelligence can exit the field, and in fact even punish this hubristical maneuver with effects like Rocky Helmet or Iron Barbs. Amazingly though, the move Bounce has been used in a competitive context before by quite a good Pokemon. Gyarados in the Gen 5 metagame has utilized Bounce. There is a simple reason for this, and that is the fact that Gyarados does not get anything better when it comes to flying type attacks. Gyarados does not get Drill Peck, it does not have a beak with which to peck anything. It does not get Brave Bird, because as far as I can tell it is not a bird. So all it has is Bounce. But even then, even though this is its only fighting type attack, you would still think that maybe it would just not bother. It could just use its Waterfall stab for physical damage, and complementary coverage like Earthquake, options like Stone Edge. It has a good physical move pool, it doesn't need to run Bounce, and Bounce seems so bad that surely, even though it's your only flying type attack, you would still rather not use it. But sometimes, you just need that flying type damage. Flying is kind of a great offensive type actually, because nothing is immune to it, and in the Gen 5 metagame in particular, there aren't that many punishes to it either. Bounce will deal big neutral damage to Ferrothorn, and though you can take Iron Barbs, the damage will be good enough that Gyarados was probably willing to click Bounce in that context. There are plenty of flying resists, but many of them will still end up taking pretty significant damage from Bounce anyway, as Gyarados is a strong Pokemon with a high attack, especially if you've Dragon Danced once or twice. And the Para chance actually makes this move okay in the face of an incoming resist. With a 30% chance to paralyze, you can actually do something against the resists incoming in and potentially cripple them for the remainder of the game. And this set right here runs Substitute to possibly take advantage of a paralyzed opponent. It also helps that Stab Waterfall just threatens many of the things that would come in on Bounce and resist it, so you have a follow-up that still deals good damage in the event that they switch in and resist. Now, don't get me wrong, if Gyarados had any other form of flying type stab, even if it was weaker in power with no para chance, it would absolutely be preferred. The bouncing effect, where you telegraph exactly what you're going to do on the following turn, is detrimental. And part of the reason Bounce is being used here is because there is no other good option. But surprisingly, despite the detriments of this attack, it is workable enough to find its way onto certain competitive sets with Gyarados to surprising viability, which I think is quite noteworthy. Now what's even more incredible is that the move Fly has some competitive use. Fly is extremely similar to Bounce, but arguably worse, as it does not have the para chance. It has a higher base power of 90 and higher accuracy of 95, but the same exact effect as Bounce, where you fly up on the first turn and strike on the next turn, telegraphing the move and inviting in an enemy to resist you. At least Bounce can spread paralysis against these incoming resists, but Fly cannot. Now perhaps you are aware that Z moves can make Fly viable, because with a Z move, the 2-turn execution does not happen, and the move is just executed immediately. This is a way to give a big form of flying physical damage to Pokemon like Dragonite and Landorus Therian in Gen 7 specifically. Many know about this, and that's not what I'm talking about, even though that's a little bit noteworthy. The Z move does bypass the 2-turn execution and therefore makes the move far better. But I'm just talking about Fly being used on its own merits without a Z move to fix its greatest problem. There is a set in Gen 6 OU involving the move Fly on the Pokemon Dragonite. And the logic was similar here to the Gyarados set. Dragonite does not get another good flying type physical attack in its moveset. Fly is its best option. And if you look at this set with Dragon Dance, Substitute Roost, and just one attack to choose from, flying is a good type to use if you're only capable of running one attacking move on a moveset. Because it is a good offensive type that hits everything without worrying about immunity. Nothing is immune to flying, and it has a good offensive profile generally. If Dragonite were to use a dragon type attack instead, that would be vulnerable to thudding into fairies. Earthquake would have the same problem, but Fly is good for this. So that's one of the main reasons, is that it's its only flying type stab option, and flying stab is very good. But the other reason is interesting. Dragonite has the ability multi-scale, which is a great ability. If Dragonite is at full HP, it will take half damage from incoming attacks. And this is great alongside Roost to restore you back to full HP and get the multi-scale back. It's great on the first turn to get Dragon Dance set up. It's part of the reason Dragonite is such an amazing Pokemon. And multi-scale kind of synergizes with Fly. If you're running leftovers, you will chip heal every turn. And so on the turn that you fly up into the air, you will heal up a bit. And while you're in the air, you are also immune to incoming attacks. This is useful because you can use this Fly chip heal to put yourself back into multi-scale range, being at full HP. And therefore, whatever incoming damage you're worried about is no longer a problem. A Fly is actually kind of good for the immunity it provides on the first turn because of this chip heal that allows you to reach multi-scale again and halve the damage from incoming attacks. Dragonite actually consulted with his personal hero and famous combat strategist Forretress to conceive this strategy together. And they bond over their shared usage of a otherwise terrible move in a competitive context, with beneficial results. Psywave is a strange move that is scarcely ever used, generally pretty bad. Psywave is a move that deals a random amount of damage equal to a range. The minimum damage Psywave can do is half of the user's level, so 50 in competitive, where everything's at level 100. And the maximum is 1.5x the user's level, so 150. This is sort of like Seismic Toss for people who like to gamble, because instead of dealing a set amount of damage, like Seismic Toss or Nightshade, it deals a random amount of damage, potentially more than Seismic Toss or Nightshade can deal. Amazingly, this move is utilized in a competitive setting by the Pokemon Bronzong in the Gen 7 RU format. Bronzong does not get Seismic Toss or Nightshade, and Psywave is kind of useful to deal a flat amount of damage that ignores damage calculation, because Bronzong is not very good at hitting steel types. This Bronzong set relies on Toxic to apply pressure to enemies, and so steel types give Bronzong problems. Its most common attack is Gyro Ball, which of course is resisted by steel, and many steel types can levitate or are steel flying, meaning Earthquake is not as effective. So Psywave is nice to just deal flat damage to those steel types and many other Pokemon in a similar way to Seismic Toss or Nightshade. Psywave is also able to hit ghost types where Seismic Toss would not be able to. And yes, it can't hit dark types, but you can just Toxic the dark types, so that's fine. So Bronzong, a Pokemon that usually relies more on its physical move pool for damage output, is weirdly using Psywave in this particular scenario because the flat, random damage it deals ends up being better and applies more pressure to the things that Bronzong has trouble with. I'm not aware of any other example of Psywave being used, but this application of it does make sense actually. And finally, I'm sure you are all familiar with the move Harden. The most famous user of this move is Kakuna, a formidable early game opponent that doesn't know any attacks and can only harden its outside layer for better cocoon defense. Very strategic. Harden is a pretty bad boosting move that simply raises your defense by one stage. An unremarkable option, inferior to many things like Bulk Up Curse, Iron Defense. A simple one stat increase is just not very good. And yet, did you know that the Pokemon Armaldo in the Gen 3 metagame utilizes Harden for a competitive advantage in a very interesting context? Armaldo is a very good defensive answer to Snorlax. It is a rock bug type, meaning it is resistant to normal, Snorlax's main physical attacking type, and also neutral to ground, This is a big deal because Snorlax commonly carries Earthquake, which would actually hit the rock types that resist normal, but not Armaldo, who is a rock bug type. Ground neutrality is very valued here. The problem though is that if Snorlax carries the move Curse, it can boost up to the point where it still defeats Armaldo. With enough attack, the neutral Earthquake will overwhelm Armaldo and it will perish. But what if Armaldo was utilizing Harden? By utilizing Harden, you can match their attack boosts with a defense boost of your own and cancel out their boosts. And since Curse only raises attack by 1, you only need to raise your defense by 1 to match them and prevent the incoming damage. Now you may think that there's a problem here, which is that Snorlax could eventually do a critical hit against you and defeat you. Critical hits bypass defensive boosts, so if Snorlax does get a critical hit, it will ignore all of your hardened defense boosts and just end you. But Armaldo has the beautiful ability Battle Armor, which grants complete immunity to critical hits, making this strategy particularly effective. Over a long period of time, it's pretty likely a crit will happen in these long 1v1s, but Armaldo is immune to that completely, and therefore a hardened Armaldo might be the hardest counter to Curse Snorlax in the whole of Gen 3 OU, which is significant. And with Knockoff to remove their leftovers, as well as Seismic Toss to wear them down, and Harden, of course, to prevent their boosts from hurting you, Armaldo destroys Snorlax. And you know what's funny? The Pokemon Kingler can actually do the exact same thing that Armaldo is doing here. Kingler also has Shell Armor to be immune to crits, and also has Harden, and Knockoff to remove Snorlax's item. So Kingler is also a pretty good answer to a Curse Snorlax. It may not have the same typing as Armaldo with the normal resistance, but it is still neutral to everything Snorlax can do, and it has a very high defense stat of 115, meaning it can absolutely stomach Snorlax's attacks. And being a water type is valued in other matchups, so Kingler with Harden can in fact do the exact same thing, utilizing its powerful crab shell for the first time ever. What intelligent evolution to get an outer shell to defend you from the random chance of a critical hit. Very smart from Kingler. And by bolstering the defense of that shell further using the move Harden, Kingler can achieve the impossible and defeat one of OU's top threats. And there you have it, folks. Various bad moves, some being from the very early game like Poison, Sting, and Harden, that have actual competitive application for sometimes humorous reasons, oddly specific, and catered to metagame conditions or the particular desires of the Pokemon carrying, which can sometimes be missed. Let me know if I missed any other cool ones in the comments down below, and thank you for watching as always.